ultimately, I think Granddad's going to be a pathetic card for Spirits.
My grandpa's deck has no pathetic cards, Kaiba.
What's good, Spirit Squad? It's been a really long time since I've actually gotten to play Magic with y'all, and apologies for that. Some life stuff has happened, but now it's mostly being resolved, and here we're going to be trying something a little bit new in today's list. I'm going to be playing all 4 copies of Spell Pierce in the main, alongside 2 copies of Invasion of Gobakhan. And this is just going to be like a list that we're playing to see if this is really a thing that we like. So I was thinking that we kind of want the list to be a little bit more disruptive in Games 1. Especially here on Arena, where there's not really going to be a such thing as Izzet Phoenix or Lotus Field to really worry about. I'm expecting things like a lot more Rakdos in slower decks like Fires of Dimension piles. So I expect the Spell Pierces and the Invasion of Gobakhan in Game 1 to be absurdly good here on Arena. And there will be matchups where we face against stuff like Mono White and it's not so great. But that's what the sideboard's for, right? Like, we've got 4 copies of Portable Hole, we've got 2 copies of Catilda. Against the mono green decks, on top of the Portable Hole, we've got 3 copies of Aether Gust. And keep it real, I don't really think that's a matchup in which we need the help, but if it's going to be even more present here on Arena, because, again, there's no Phoenix to beat up on mono green, than it is in paper play, then we just appreciate the extra sideboard space that we have the ability to devote to mono green. There's going to be 4 copies of Wedding Announcement and 2 Mystical Disputes. Again, there's no Phoenix and there's no Lotus Petal, but there's certainly going to be Spirits Mirrors. So that's what we're going to be doing with this list. And as we do some gameplay today, we're also going to be going over a few of the spoilers that I found really interesting so far from the Lost Caverns of Ixalan. So we'll talk about that as we go through our gameplay. Anyway, I'll see y'all in round 1. Today's video brought to you by FusionGamingOnline.com. Your one-stop shop for all your gaming needs. Alright, so the first card we're going to go over is Abuelo Ancestral Echo, and this card is going to be a 3 mana, so 1 a blue and a white for a 2/2 flyer with Ward 2, and Ward is actively pretty great, so I'm excited about that part. And it's got an activated ability, so it's going to be 1 a white and a blue, you exile another target creature or artifact you control, and then you get it back at the beginning of the next end step. So you can do things like rescuing some of your creatures from sweepers like Supreme Verdict, which isn't bad. You can rescue something from just like a removal spell, something that you know that you really, really want for later. For example, if you're in a super late game against blue-white control, you can rescue like a Spectral Sailor that can draw you cards. Stuff like that. So Abuelo certainly comes with some upsides, but unfortunately it's a 3 mana 2/2 that's sorcery speed, and man, there's a lot of not great text on this card, right? Like, just, it's a 2/2 and not a 2/3, which really sucks against stuff like unpowered Fiery Impulses. It sucks against Play with Fire. It sucks against Bone Crusher Giant Stomp. So there's a lot of unfortunate downsides to being able to play with Abuelo, but overall, it's a card that is not the worst against removal piles because of the Ward 2. So I wouldn't blame anybody for trying to play with Granddad, but ultimately, I think Granddad's going to be a pathetic card for Spirits. Okay, welcome to the first round of gameplay. We're on the play with a half-decent 3-lander here. So I'm not super excited about the Supreme Phantom being the only creature here, but I do have a Spell Pierce and I'm on the play, so we can block against stuff like Thoughtseize. And seeing what land they play on turn 1 will tell me more about whether I want to play Supreme Phantom on turn 2, or whether I want to wait until turn 3 and then give myself the option of Supreme Phantom plus Spell Pierce, or just like a Naked Geistlight Snare. So we'll find out. Okay. And a Shattered Sanctum. Okay, so that tells me that I'm likely facing against some nonsense, like some like black-white control pile. This could also like randomly just be like Greasefang with a subpar mana base, but so far, looks like it's smelling like Esper stuff here. So I'm going to Supreme Phantom first, giving myself the option of Spell Pierce. Double white does give them access to stuff like Temporary Lockdown, but I think I'm okay just risking it for like a turn here. Let's see what happens. Tainted Indulgence, where Esper Greasefang? Oh, you know what? Crap. Oh, oops. I wanted to Spell Pierce that. Well, at least they discarded a land. So it wasn't a copy of Greasefang. So that's good at least. But what's with this mana base if they're Greasefang? Solemnity. Oh, sheesh. Absolutely not happening. Okay, so Solemnity goes with 9 lives, and the combo is that you have this so that your opponent's stuff can't get counters, and you play 9 lives, which is a card that says whenever you would take damage, you get a counter on this thing, and if it ever gets 9 counters, then you lose the game. But this stops it from getting counters, so you can just absorb infinity damage. So, like, that's what they're trying to get away with here. Do I walk into a Shark Typhoon? Yes, that's fine. So what's this, a Memory Deluge? Impulse. Impulse is fine. If it was a Memory Deluge, I was going to go ahead and use a Geistlight Snare, but if it's just an Impulse, then whatever, I can let that rock. So let's see what manner of bad thing happens here. Okay, so it's a Thought Seize. Actually going to Geistlight Snare to see if they want to pay for that. They do want to pay for that? Well, let's put them on a clock. Like, chances are, if they have a Supreme Verdict, I don't particularly care about that, but now they can't really, like, Verdict here and Thought Seize. If they do that, then what I'm going to do is simply respond to the Thought Seize with Rattle Chains. Okay, so there's the 9 lives. We're absolutely not letting that resolve. So it looks like combo dodged, and we've won game 1. Sick. Haven't seen that in a really long time. So I think all we want is the 2 copies of Mystical Dispute to come in for just 2 copies of Supreme Phantom. And I'm specifically choosing to take out Supreme Phantom because I don't want to play a bunch of creatures into a Supreme Verdict anyway, so I may as well take out the card that most incentivizes us to play a bunch of cards at once, and that's the Supreme Phantom. Shacklegeist has 2 power instead of 1, which can be pretty big for things like sideboarded creatures, or if we're just trying to, like, attack a copy of Invasion of Gobakhan. So I'm going to hold up the Spell Pierce rather than Mausoleum Wanderer here, for exactly stuff like that. So I use Spell Pierce instead of Mystical Dispute because this can help me fight, like, random counter wars and stuff later. And I think Mystical Dispute's a little bit better against any sideboard juke creatures too. So if they're playing, I don't know, like Dream Trawler or stuff like that, Impulse is fine. But yeah, Search for Azcanta is a little scary, not gonna lie. So it's a Fatal Push. It's a Thought Seize. I do not care about that. You can have that. I'd rather have my Mausoleum Wanderer on board and give myself the chance to look for, like, a Curious Obsession or something off the top. Not particularly close, but that's okay. Let's just get an attack in. And if they cast something like a 9 lives or Solemnity, I'll be pretty happy to counter that now. Alright, so it looks like that's not what's going to happen. If they have a Shark, they can cycle it for 1. I'm not going to use my Mutavault here. If they Field of Ruin, then I can animate Mutavault, use my Rattle Chains. That they don't know about. Tainted Indulgence, I will Mystical Dispute that. Yeah, this still works. So if they Field of Ruin here, I've got exactly 3 mana, so I can use this to animate this, and then use these 2 mana to protect Mutavault with Rattle Chains, and that's a pretty massive blowout if that ends up being what happens. So here, I'm going to respond to the Thought Seize and give itself the Hexproof, and I'm going to just let that resolve. They can just have that. I'm not popping Mausoleum Wanderer for that, but I will put 2 more damage on the table if possible. So there's a 9 lives, which I certainly don't appreciate, but it is going to happen. As long as we are dodging a Resolve Solemnity, then it's not that bad. I'll just put 3 counters on this thing and see if maybe we can get out of this. If they have a Solemnity, okay, good, good, good. I do enjoy it when they don't have Solemnity. So now what can I do? I can animate Mutavault. Like that, actually. If I animate Mutavault, then they can go ahead and Field of Ruin it, and I'm okay with that. I have more lands in the deck. I like this a little less. What are we doing? Oh, that's fine. Because this doesn't take away from my land count for things like the Hall of Storm Giants. So we're both going to get our thing here. They're going to go up to 5 counters on the 9 lives, essentially. Void Rend. Okay, can't counter that. You got it. So we're going up to 4 counters instead. It's a very slow clock, but it is better than doing nothing. So let's see if this resolves. Okay. Now do I get to untap with both creatures? Looks like a negative. I'm not playing Extraction Specialist, so it's whatever. I can at least animate this now. So we have 6 counters. Still much, much slower than I would like, but another Tainted Indulgence. Okay. Do not be the... Damn it. There it is. I think we're just going to move to game 3. I don't believe I have a way in the deck to get rid of that here. Yeah, that was just 100% good for them. Okay, cool. Good to know. So those cards just cannot resolve. So sometimes we'll have things like Destroy Evil or Skyclave Apparition in the sideboard, and I'm just not playing any of those, which I don't regret. Like, whatever. If I get 9 lives Solemnity again, then fuck it, so be it. But we do have a pretty positive matchup against this brand of nonsense, and I think this is actually pretty good. So I can start off with Mausoleum Wanderer. not play around turn 1 Thoughtseize here. If they do, then I guess I will actually... Oh, sick. I was going to say I will just pop the Mausoleum Wanderer to protect the invasion. I think that's a little more important here. So, I don't give a shit about this at all. All right, so I'm going to take the 9 lives and make it cost 5. And then we can attack over here. And then next turn, what I can do is play the second Mausoleum Wanderer, pumping this one up to 2 power, holding up Spell Pierce, and that gives me the ability to flip the invasion this turn rather than having to wait, which is pretty sick. So let's do that. You go sideways. We flip you into the Light Shield Array. Life is awesome and amazing for just one of us. And hint, it's not going to be the opponent. So here they can cast a Void Rend targeting the Light Shield Array if they really wanted to. And that is actually what's going to happen here. So yeah, sure, you got it. Aha, my creatures have indestructible. Doesn't matter. Okay. So now we're going to just hold up the ability to draw with Mausoleum Wanderer, or draw with Spectral Sailor. If they cast Solemnity this turn and don't do anything else, I'm not going to counter it. Instead, I'm just going to Sorcerous Spyglass. Activated abilities of just Spectral Sailor? Yeah, whatever. That's fine. I think that's fine. Like, this is almost them wasting a turn. Like, they could have shut down something like, I don't know, say Mutavault, or maybe even the Hall of Storm Giants. Shutting off Mausoleum Wanderer is honestly fine. Oh, sick. Even easier. So I'm just going to do this, get myself the nice pumps, get some big attacks in for 6. They go down to 10. I'm holding up double counterspell. They don't know about the Spell Pierce. And if they do something else I don't care about this turn, then I can draw with Spectral Sailor again. Like, I would, honestly, I almost would rather just draw with Sailor and let them have their cards. Yeah, I'm actually gonna do that. You can just have that. Like, they don't know about the Geistlight Snare. Their Mastermind's acquisitions are effectively them taking a turn off for me. And look at that, we drew the Spell Queller. So, like, life is easy, right? So what if I got 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8? If I put Spell Queller in play, that's not lethal, so we're not doing it. Pass. So now, even if they found a Supreme Verdict, I'm still good. 9 lives. Can't really have that. We've got 5 on the table, so opponent, you better do something right now. And they can't, so looks like GG's. Nice. Okay, so the next card we're going to talk about is a super huge one, right? And that's going to be Cavern of Souls. This card is incredibly exciting. It's one also that, as Spirits pilots, we both like and don't like, because, of course, making creature spells uncounterable is a super huge deal for a typo deck like Spirits that's playing 24 plus creatures. The only downside is that we're also the counterspell deck. So yeah, we're gonna, the verdict is gonna be out as to whether we're truly excited about this, because that also means that we're not the biggest beneficiary of Cavern of Souls. I believe that title's actually gonna go to mono white humans, but there's a lot of really big upsides and even downsides to Cavern of Souls for us. First of all, it's painless. So in a format where we're worried about decks like mono white aggro, Gruul Sagas, we're watching out for things like Phoenix that can just race us with life totals. We're worried about like Boros Convoke, Boros Pia decks. There's a lot of random matchups in which your life total ends up mattering a lot. Sometimes you even find yourself racing against mono green when it's just like an attack for attack strategy. So having another land in your deck that's not named a Darker Wastes is going to be pretty nice when you're taking an average of 1 to 2 damage less per game. That can matter a lot. And also, just the uncounterable plus flash strategy is already where we want to be in life. So the fact that we're not really walking into so many mystical disputes and things in a format where Rending Valley is the most commonly played card, it's gonna end up being a pretty big deal for us. So I'm excited to win all of the mystical disputes still in the opponent's hands type of matchup. So like if we're playing against things like Phoenix, Creativity, Spirits Mirrors, control matchups like blue-black and blue-white. Yeah, we just played against Esper Control, right? Where it's very likely all of these decks have the ability to put in Mystical Dispute. Well, Cavern of Souls really stops that from being a viable sideboard strategy a lot of the time. And I'm going to look forward to blowing opponents out and having them stuck with miserable cards in hand. And then lands in Pioneer, while they are mostly bad because there's no fetch lands, there's also no such thing as Wasteland or Blood Moon. So in Pioneer specifically, you get to play with some really powerful lands. Like you get a bunch of creature lands across all the decks. Spoiler, we'll talk about that soon. But we're not necessarily worried about things being ruined by cards like Blood Moon or Wasteland. So you can just play your Cavern of Souls with relative impunity, and that part is nice. Like, what's the worst threat to lands? Field of Ruin most of the time? Like, we're gonna be okay. The downsides to Cavern for specifically our decks are gonna be that Cavern simply doesn't provide colors for casting non-creature spells. And as a deck that plays white cards, we have a lot of really good white sideboard options, right? Like we have Portable Holes, Wedding Announcements, Invasion of Gobakhan, Deafening Silence, Rest in Peace. There's all kinds of good white sideboard cards that Cavern of Souls doesn't really help to contribute. And that is going to give us a little bit of sad times because that means that if you're playing Cavern of Souls, then you really have to question whether you also want to be playing Mutavault in your deck or not. And Mutavault's a pretty welcome addition to your deck, especially when you're playing cards like Invasion of Gobakhan, that Mutavault's actively pretty decent at attacking for a low cost. So that can get a little bit awkward on your mana, and you might want to restructure your mana base from what we're looking at now if you are going to be playing with Cavern of Souls. Okay, so round 2, we're on the draw this time. I've got a 2-lander with a decent amount of creatures and a Mausoleum Wanderer and a Geistlight Snare for counterspells, so I'm going to be relatively happy with this. A Castle Ardenvale means that either Humans has a relatively slow draw with a bunch of 2-drops, or we see a blue-white control list. So I'm going to go ahead and do this. And if they want to, okay, I was going to say, if they want to counterspell that with something like, say, a Censor or Jwari Disruption, I was just going to be okay with that. But here, if they're just going to, like, whoa, Rona's Vortex, okay. I was expecting that to be something like a March of Otherworldly Light, but I'll settle for putting in Mausoleum Wanderer and then flashing in Spectral Sailor. So if I want to cast a Spell Queller at some point, I am going to need a white mana, but that's fine because I can currently do things like double casting here, which I think is a little more valuable and then just like not doing that. Discontinuity. Well, we're playing against the Blue-White Lotus deck. Understood. That's fine. Spell Pierce. Okay. Not mad at it. We're going to get our attack on here, and I am going to Geistlight a copy of Strict Proctor if we see one. And if we don't see one, then like so much the better. And honestly, that's like by far the most annoying card for us in this matchup is Strict Proctor, which is super annoying because Strict Proctor is a spirit, so it's also a fucking traitor. So if you ever hear me randomly calling Strict Proctor and Uncle Tom, that's why. Like, it definitely just is. And I don't feel bad about saying that at all. Okay, so there's a Thespian stage, not a Lotus Field, so that's a half decent start. And here I will Rattle Chains. If they have another discontinuity, so be it. Memory Deluge. I will pop this and not let you have that if you don't mind. So yeah, if they just like don't get to draw a shit ton of cards, then I'm feeling pretty good about our game plan. Especially since like once they start getting Lotus Field plus Thespian stage active, it is gonna be relatively hard for us to get all of their shit under control. So here I want to actually use a Geistlight Snare first. So if I draw another land, then I can Productive Spell plus Spell Pierce, like that, thank you deck. And this gives me a much more productive way to being able to win the game. So now, say they cast like another Teferi, right? This time, instead of just Geistlight Snaring, I have the ability to Spell Pierce plus Shacklegeist untap, start attacking for 4, holding up Spell Queller. That's a much more productive route to victory than just using the Spell Pierce last turn and having 2 Geistlight Snares in hand this turn. So there's the Lotus Field, and now they're going to be able to use the Thespian stage to copy the Lotus Field. So starting next turn, they're going to have approximately, absolutely the fuck not opponent. That is very cool. Not happening, but very cool. No fucking shot are we allowing that nonsense. So you take that, you go to 9, and what do they have? 3, 6, 7, 8 mana? Okay. And the cool part about Memory Deluge here being in their hand is if they want to cast the Memory Deluge, then I think I actually Spell Queller, let them respond to the Queller with Deluge, untap, attack for 6, give myself a chance to draw a Supreme Phantom, or simply a land to hold up double interaction. Yeah, let's do that. And if they just like, I don't know, cast a Discontinuity for 2, then that does stop their ability to cast Deluge as well, so like that's also decent. And there's a Discontinuity. So I'm okay with that. Now they only have 6. They can't cast this, which is nice. And you take this and go to 5. Yep, can't do much about that. So now they have 6, 7, 8, like we said. There's another Thespian stage, but I don't care about that anymore. So now all we need to do is dodge this card being able to interact with us, really. Because if they cast this, they only have 2 to work with anyway, and I have a Spell Queller, so I just like really don't care about that. So I'm going to just cast a Rattle Chains and see what they say about that. There's a Deluge, you got it. So now even if they draw Discontinuity, they can't cast it because they don't have double blue anymore. They could get, what, a white card plus March of Otherworldly Light? And that's not even like good. That's just very medium, borderline, kind of acceptable. Yeah, I didn't think so. All right, back it up. So that's game 1 against Lotus Field Control. Here I want Mystical Disputes and not really anything else. Of note, Portable Hole is a triggered ability which Strict Proctor will stop. So if you're going to try to Strict Proctor against that deck, I would probably advise not trying that. Unless you want to pay 3, in which case, by all means, you're allowed. But you will end up having to pay a total of 3 if you want a Portable Hole on a Strict Proctor. So let's see what ends up happening here. This is actually fine. I think 4 lands is probably like 1 too many, but realistic. Oh, a double Spectral Sailor is actually kind of nice. So as long as this isn't a Strict Proctor this turn, we can do some stuff. Okay, and that's fine. I don't mind if they counterspell this. If they counterspell this, oh, Impulse, even better. I was going to say, then I get to untap an Invasion, which isn't the best thing here, but it's certainly not the worst. If I draw a CO, nope, okay. I was going to say, if I draw a CO, I will actually do that rather than this, but I'm just going to do this. Niv Mizzet. Get the fuck out of my face. That card is incredibly good against us and can't even be countered. So yeah, making it cost 8, pretty good. Note to self, watch out for Eiganjo, but I think I'm okay with that. If they just like play a Thespian stage and hold up Eiganjo, I'm honestly kind of okay with that. Oh, they don't even hold up Eiganjo? What the hell is this card then? Is this a fucking Proctor? Oh, they're just casting Impulse. Oh, we really don't care about that. A Spell Pierce. Spell Pierce. That's freaking great. So what I can do here is play the island, develop the CO, hold up Spell Pierce, use the Spectral Sailor to attack the invasion, and that gives me the ability to both protect it from Eiganjo with the Indestructible on Light Shield Array, and because of the +1 counter from Light Shield Array, this will become a 3/3, and that means that it beats Strict Proctor in 1v1. Hell yeah, that was kind of excellent there. There's a Strict Proctor. So since I can beat it in 1v1 combat, I'm no longer as scared of it, but a Lotus Field here still sucks. Yeah, like, it is what it is. I will put you into play. Untap. Otawara, do I care? No, I do not. I have Spell Pierce plus Dispute if I do this still, so I'm gonna do this. Attack with the 2 creatures that Strict Proctor can't kill 1v1, and know that they're both gonna get pumped by the Light Shield Array. So this is pretty sick. And they only have 1 mana, so the only thing I even kind of worry about here is a March of Otherworldly Light, but I really doubt that. Oh man, they actually had it. Well, alright. I'm still doing this. I'd rather do that than sacrifice my Light Shield Array, especially since I still have a Mystical Dispute for the Pour Over the Pages. That's fine. I get to draw a card then. That's pretty sick. All right. A little less sick if I maybe like don't draw the good cards rather than more darker wastes. But keep it real, I'm still fairly happy with this, right? Like I get a Mystical Dispute to counter to Pour Over the Pages. I get to untap, immediately start attacking again. That's rough. That means that next turn they are going to be able to make Niv Mizzet. That is unfortunate and terrifying, and all of the bad things in the world rolled into one. So what do we got? 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 mana. All right. Well, you can't pay 3. Phew, phew. And lucky for us, that also means they just sacrifice their ability to play the this thing, unless they decide that's not bad. It's not good, but it's not bad. How do I want to proceed here? I'm gonna take down the ability to play around Niv Mizzet this turn. Yeah. Okay, good. Jump your dumbass in front. So now I get to do this, and in my next turn, I can still bounce the Niv Mizzet, because now they can go ahead and copy the Lotus Field. Okay, they play that too, which is fine because I have Light Shield Array, so like they're obviously a lot less worried about that. But oh no, they can just cast this, right? 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Oh man, they can just cast it. All right, so it does use all of their mana. That's a 5/5, and that's a 4/4. Okay. Oh, what is this? Oh, Wandering Emperor. That's great for me. So now they can try to target my Spectral Sailor, but I've got a Rattle Chains, and now I don't even need to sacrifice the Light Shield Array. This does play into Supreme Verdict pretty well, since I still have the Light Shield Array too, so I'm in for this. So now I get to protect this. If that card's a Supreme Verdict, it doesn't do anything because I already have Light Shield Array, and since they put off playing this for a turn, they're pretty cooked. Okay, that's also actively great. So now I can animate Mutavault and still have mana open for Otawara / Spectral Sailor. So I'm gonna attack you with this. 1, 2, 3. We'll attack your face. And do bad things happen? Oh shit, no bad things happen. Cool. And a Hall of Storm Giants is not a bad draw. Yep, can't do much about that. But yeah, now this is super sick. Even if they resolve Niv Mizzet now, I don't really care anymore because our army is just way too big, especially with the Light Shield Array still being on the table. There's a farewell. Okay. Legitimately, do I care? I think the answer is actually no. Like, I've got this on a table. It's a 5/5. I'm just going to draw a card. I mean, that obviously does 0, but, you know. Yeah, that doesn't do anything. So I get to animate you and still have mana here. So even, yeah, they can make a creature and I can just bounce it. So GG's opponent. Okay, so we want to not let them go to blockers. We're just going to bounce that with the Otawara, and then they can finish taking their damage and get fucked. All right, sick. Easy peasy. Okay, so next up we've got a removal spell called Get Lost, and this is one that I am super excited about. Get Lost does so much stuff for us. And what it is, it's a 1 and a white, it's an instant spell. Destroy target creature, enchantment, or planeswalker, its controller creates 2 map tokens. And map tokens are artifacts that you can tap sack itself and pay 1. And target creature you control explores. So your opponent gets 2 of those whenever you remove one of their things. But I legitimately think that is not much of a drawback here. So Get Lost does so much cool stuff for us, and unlike cards like Declaration in Stone, it's an instant, which means you have some really nice counterplay against all kinds of creatures that you really just cannot deal with, especially at sorcery speed. So if you're holding up mana for something like, I don't know, say like a Shieldred or something, you know, by the time you untap, draw a card, a lot of the time you're already like taking damage. They already got value out of their sweet card, and it just kind of like sucks to be you because a lot of the times you're holding up mana for things like counter magic or rattle chains for interaction. But now with Get Lost, you can just, well, tell something to get lost. And for 2 mana, that's really, really good. The map tokens against us are also not that big of a deal, right? Because it plays into 2 different things that we're doing. First of all, if they're using mana on a map token to explore one of their things, that's fine because that's mana that they're taking down from being able to use the rest of their spells. So like if they're using a mana for exploring, that's a mana that they're not using to like cast a fatal push or play on curve so that they can double spell and try to play under or around our counter spells. It walks them actively into our better cards like the Spell Pierces and the Geistlight Snares that otherwise lose value over time. But if they're busy exploring, even 1 mana can matter a lot when you're holding cards that are conditional counter spells. So that's going to be pretty sweet. And we already talked about Shieldred, but getting rid of enchantments, even if you want to play this card in game 1, is still super on the table, right? Like you can get rid of things like temporary lockdowns, Enigmatic Incarnation, Fires of Invention, Shieldred. Like, there's so much stuff happening right now. Heck, even against Mono Green, you can get rid of stuff like Wolfwillow Haven, and it does Planeswalker, so you can get rid of Karns, you can get rid of Kioras, you can get rid of, like, Teferi 5s. There's all kinds of really good targets in this format that I think Get Lost is going to be, like, super, super stellar at dealing with, and I think this is going to go be a card that goes a little bit underrated because it's a white removal spell. And the only deck that typically wants white removal spells is blue-white control, and that deck will definitely play this, but it's already good. So a lot of people, I think, are going to underrate this card. They're going to see it kind of as like a, hey, here's one more good white removal spell with conditions in a whole sea of white removal spells with conditions. But I think the sleeper is that we get to make some really good use of this. And when a deck that normally doesn't get removal that's close to unconditional gets removal that's close to unconditional, shit gets real very quickly. And I think this is going to be one of those toys that I start off by playing 2 copies of it in the main, and I don't know if I want to play 2 in the main and 2 in the board quite yet. That'll come with some testing after Lost Caverns is actually released, but I would not be surprised if we head into that territory. So I'm going to say pre-order your copies of this now since they're super low priced, and just kind of celebrate your life later. The only downside to this card is that in a deck that really wants to be creature dense, it simply isn't a creature. So that's why we would want to play cards like, say, Skyclave Apparition, Werefox Bodyguard, or even in the past we've played things like Detention of Deputy. Deputy of Detention? Deputy of Detention, all the way around. And those things can attack. You can put Curious Obsessions on them. With Shacklegeists, you can tap the ones that are spirits to tap down your opponent's creatures, and Get Lost doesn't do any of those things. So there are some trade-offs, but I think the trade-offs for specifically Get Lost are so incredibly low for the value potential that we can get from it that it's going to be worth playing anyway. I think I will be very happy to play this, so I'm looking to hear about your inputs on this card as well. If you're a fan of Get Lost, tell me why in the comments. I'm really curious about this one. Anyway, let's keep it going to the next round. Be sure to check out additional content from myself, Nikachu, the Commander Cookout, and others at themanabase.com. Okay, so we're going to be on our third and final round for the day here with 2 COs, a Mausoleum, and a Geistlight Snare on the draw. So, against Mono Blue, okay. So, we get to do the cool Spider-Man meme where each player's pointing at each other, and if they don't have the Wombo combo start, then I do, and let's see what happens here. It looks like they do have the CO, so they're going to get to start drawing cards, and life's going to be sad, and we're going to not block, and that's going to happen. They're going to draw a card, and then we're going to untap, and we're going to do the same shit, and we're going to draw a card, and life's going to be grand, but only for one of us. So here, I'm actually going to start with the Mausoleum Wanderer. So the Mausoleum Wanderer plays around their ability to, like, spell pierce with this mana. So now I'm going to cast my CO, flip out the back targeting my Wanderer. Very cool, don't care. Well, that's false, I care. But it's not going to happen. Boop. So now the draw card Boopathon continues, and let's see if we get to kind of make a comeback here because they're on the play, so they get to do a few more things than we do. And the nature of the matchup is such that they typically get a little bit of a leg up under us anyway because they're just playing like more 1-drops than we are. The upside here is that I do have the combination of Geistlight Snare plus a Spell Pierce, and looks like we're just going to get to draw anyway, so hell yeah, run it. I do appreciate the land drops for next turn. I'm not casting shit right now, though. So whatever you want to try, you can just... yucky. That is actively kind of yucky for us. I really don't want to be looking at Spectral Sailors. The only card I want to see less than Spectral Sailor right now is probably like a Shacklegeist, and there's a Supreme Phantom. So I can go ahead and do this. And I do have the Spell Pierce to back it up too, so if this is a Geistlight Snare, then I'm actually pretty okay with that. It is a Geistlight Snare. So now I can Spell Pierce their Geistlight Snare, and if they want to make me pay 2, then that's fine because they're getting rid of Wanderer to do so. So now this is going to counter their Supreme Phantom. I am going to take the 2. They are going to draw a card. They're attacking me for 3, actually. They're not even threatening a block with this. That plays pretty well for me, right? I think I just get to do this. See if they want to... You know what? Fuck it. Let's attack first. So I thought about putting the second Curious Obsession on, but depending on what I draw here... A Geistlight Snare. Okay. That's actively really good. So now I can Supreme here, and it just resolved. Okay, that is great news for me. So I could have simply put the Curious Obsession on the Supreme Phantom. There's a Shacklegeist that I was scared about earlier. Okay, so I am going to try to counter that. If they pop Mausoleum Wanderer, then that is a small victory here. Woo! Shacklegeist counter, let's go! Shacklegeist number 2, fuck you! Oh no, that's really bad. All right, that's fine. I'll go to 8. So I'm going to go to 8, going to cry about it. And here, if they want to tap down my Mausoleum Wanderer, I will put in the Rattle Chains. So, oh my god, that is so good for us. Not playing the second Curious Obsession then. All right, so I'm going to put the Rattle Chains in play now, see if that resolves. Please resolve. Okay, good. So here's that. Now your plan sucks. Cool. We are now relatively happy little flyers. So if one of these is like a Spectral Sailor to go ahead and try to block, that's fine. Okay, so now I get to draw another card, and I've got 4 cards that are soon to be 3, which is pretty good for us. I want to just resolve this. I'm not going to try to get cute. So I could have put it in during combat for an extra 2 points of damage. But I legitimately think this was like a better line for us here. Okay, good. I was gonna say we've got a much bigger board, and even with a Supreme Phantom, we weren't really guaranteed to have a bad time there. So we want all the Catildas, we want the 2 Mystical Disputes, we want the 4 Portable Holes. I do not really care for Invasion of Gobakhan. What else do I not particularly want here? I don't particularly want Geistlight Snares. Like, they're not bad, but they're not good. And I actually am going to take out 2 of the COs. So let's play like this. And what my goal here is going to be to depend on my white cards to kind of extend the game to a point where my opponent just like can't really productively do much about what we're doing. So here I've got 2 Wanderers in a dispute, so I'm already pretty happy about that. And they took a mulligan, which is great for us as well. So a thing that I didn't even bother noticing until just now, opponent's username is Crollo, and I am definitely a fan of Hunter x Hunter, so Crollo is certainly an appreciated username. I had to dispute anyway. All right, we take those, I guess. GG's opponent. Okay, so the last spoiler that we're going to talk about here is actually going to be Restless Anchorage, which is a really sweet creature land for us. So Restless Anchorage enters a battlefield tapped, and you tap it to add a blue or a white. No pain, so lots of gain. And for 1, a blue and a white, so for 3, and it becomes a 2/3 blue-white bird flyer that makes a map token when it attacks. So I'm actually pretty excited about Restless Anchorage, right? Like, we were already kind of cool about playing Mutavault, and Mutavault doesn't fly, and we're still fairly happy with it, right? The same goes for Restless Haven. So even in our last round just now, we played against Mono Blue, where I'm playing Mutavault, my opponent's playing Faceless Haven, and both decks are very glad for their creature lands. But it does come up sometimes that these creatures don't fly. And the fact that Restless Anchorage does is going to be pretty sweet for just us a lot of the time. Like, I think Restless Anchorage, even though it comes into play tapped, is a pretty respectable creature land, and I'm probably going to be pretty happy to play exactly 2 copies of this card in the deck. I don't know about a third one, but I think 2 is a pretty sweet point. So once again, it flies, it flies, it flies. I cannot state enough how good that is for us. The fact that it flies means, of course, it is just like on theme with the rest of our deck, right? Like, our deck is already hard to deal with because our shit flies. But that's especially important when you're doing things with cards like Invasion of Gobakhan, where cards like Mutavault and Skyclave Apparition will sometimes just have a difficult time attacking into that. But Restless Anchorage doesn't have that problem because it naturally flies. So just one more big flying threat that's tucked away in your mana base is gonna be pretty big game for us. And then, unlike Mutavault and Faceless Haven, again, the fact that this card actually makes blue and white is a pretty big deal. So this plays a little bit better into your sideboard cards. Remember, we were complaining earlier about so many of our sideboard cards being white, and Cavern of Souls even not helping to cast those, but Restless Anchorage totally does. And as we saw, the list that I was just messing around with happened to have all 4 Spell Pierces in the main. Spell Pierce is a card that's a lot more palatable if some of your lands come in tapped, but you still want to interact very early on. So I'm going to be pretty happy to try out Restless Anchorage and see if by the time the regional championship in America rolls around, I end up actually liking this card. I think I will. And then the last thing that we want to talk about here is, of course, the fact that Restless Anchorage isn't a spirit. And that actually is a pretty big deal because both Azoria spirits with Mutavault and Mono Blue spirits with Restless Haven, Faceless Haven, they both use the fact that their spirits fairly often. Like, we'll have plenty of games in which your opponent is trying to interact with your lands with stuff like Fatal Push, Bonecrusher Giant Stomp, Field of Ruin even, and you get the sweet line of animating your land and protecting your land with Rattle Chains. That's a huge deal. Or animating your land and coupling it with a Shacklegeist to tap down one of your opponent's huge threats without actually having to sacrifice attackers because you just had a Mutavault or a Faceless Haven tucked away in your mana base. Those are pretty big games. So the fact that you have a pretty steep trade-off is going to be a thing that you want to consider when building your decks. Like, do you want the additional synergy and the lower activated cost of your Mutavault? Or do you want guaranteed colored mana a lot more of the time and a flying creature land in Restless Anchorage? Mono Blue, of course, won't consider playing this because this card isn't a mono blue card. But for Azorius pilots, we kind of have a lot to think about between Cavern of Souls and Restless Anchorage to see if either or both of these are going to be cards that we actually want to play. Currently, I'm thinking 2 and 2, but to be determined. Anyway, really exciting stuff out of Lost Caverns coming for us. All right, so nice little comeback, right? We got to play 3 rounds of Explorer with Blue White Spirits, our trademark deck, and we rattled off a fairly easy 3-0. So sweet, sweet, sweet times there. A nice little welcome back. Glad to see y'all too. Glad to see our opponents are also happy to see us and gifted us with some nice wins on the way in. So that was very nice of them. On jokes aside, I actively liked the Spell Pierces and the Invasion of Gobakons. I think that was one of those things where on Arena, I would actively keep these in the main. If I were playing in real life, where decks like Mono White are a lot more popular, Convoke is a lot more popular, I think Invasion is not really a main deck card, obviously really good in the sideboard. But the 4 Spell Pierces, so far, I'm kind of digging it. So I think I'm going to test around with these a few more, especially once Lost Caverns actually comes out, because cards like Lofty Denial are going to lose a little bit of their value. With Cavern of Souls, I think a lot more people are going to be playing Mono White than they were previously. So I'm going to have a lot less stock in a card like Lofty Denial and a lot more stock in a card like Spell Pierce, because we're already not countering creatures from Mono White a lot of the time anyway. And Spell Pierce is good against just about every other deck. So I think that's going to be a direction that's certainly worth testing. And if this is interesting to you and you want to test it out even before Lost Caverns comes out, then put in the comments. Let me know how it goes, right? I'm interested in finding out what everybody else is doing. And as for the sideboard, that's definitely changing once Lost Caverns actually comes out. But we'll see, just how many copies of Get Lost we want to play. We'll see what happens if anybody is trying Abuelo and maybe it's better than I think it is. We're going to see what's up with the mana base and whether both Caverns and Restless Anchorage are actually worth playing, or whether people just decide to not play either. Maybe you want to play Mono Blue, whatever, we'll find out. But anyway, that was a really, really fun little showcasing of the deck again, and of some of the cards that we can be excited about from Lost Caverns. I hope they generate a lot of discussion. Speaking of, that's going to be the end of our discussion for today. So, welcome back, of course, and if you liked today's video, make sure you let me know by clicking the like button, subscribing to the channel if you're new, and I'll see y'all on the next one.